So this is picking up off of the pictorial directions that were printed for you, showing the lining portion. So one of the linings is already pictured. You're going to put together, make sure you have left and right. So you have the left and right armhole. Looks a little weird right now because it's not what we're used to looking at. You've matched your notches for the elbow. Make sure that you have the right sides together. And you're going to press this seam flat. Then you'll bring over the other side and sew the half-inch seam allowance. So this is the way the sleeves are constructed as well as the lining. Now, lining patterns are made especially slightly larger because typically your lining fabric is lighter weight and more fluid, and then the reason you don't want them to be identical is like in the armhole and the side seams, you don't want everything landing in the same place. It'll be bulky, so they have it just a little bit looser. So I'm going to set that sleeve aside, and I'm going to show you with the lining piece how this looks too. So all these pieces, when I go to join them to the jacket, they're going to all be pressed flat. I have a left and a right. So when you cut this out, go ahead and turn that corner and you can slash into that, but you're not going to sew it all the way because you're going to cut part of this away. Okay? And then this is where I run out of thread at home, so I'm going to go ahead and finish out that seam and join my other shoulder so that I have a complete lined garment. Okay, so this is also pictured in the handouts, but this is what it looks like in three dimensions. Okay, and I'm going to demonstrate the best way to sew the set-in sleeve. Now on this one, I've already attached the lining for the hem, and that's shown in the picture with the half-inch seam. When you turn it inside out or right side out, you'll pick up the hem. You'll bring your lining equal to the cap of the sleeve, and that's how long your lining is, and that's where you press your hem. So you won't see any stitches for a hem. It's clean. But now when I'm going to sew this to the garment, I don't need the lining, so I'm going to get that out of the way. And usually when I put sleeves in, I like to have them turned right side out. And I actually put them on my arm to make sure I have the right direction. So this has the double notches to the back. I put it on my arm. I know this is my right sleeve. So I put it into the right armhole. Bring it through. All right, anytime you're sewing a sleeve in the round like this, you always want to sew on the part where the sleeve is, not on the body. You have better control and less puckering. So we're going to start out by matching the underarm notch. Okay, if there were a seam, this would be your side seam. But the panel jacket is in threes, so it's the underarm notch, and that's going to start sewing at a half-inch seam allowance. And I'm going to first just walk it to make sure I have a good alignment. I have a notch here for the front. I have a notch here for my shoulder, and then my double notches to the back. So I know everything's lining up. And I'll go ahead and start stitching it all together. There may be a little bit of ease in the cap. So if you want to put an ease stitch in the cap, you can, or you can manipulate your fabric. It's not a lot, but again, if you're doing a home sewing pattern, it might be slightly different. But basically the notches will keep you in place. Okay, so you can see I have a little bit of ease there. So I'm going to manipulate my fabric and keep that notch right there. Or you can do an E-stitch. Basically, I'm just letting these fall in as I stitch, but again, the E-stitch will help to pull that as well. Do that. And you see, I've already pressed my seams flat, so when I'm going over them, so we're not overlocking any seams because we have lining. So okay. So now I'm ready for my shoulder pads. So when you put in the shoulder pad, you want the straight edge out toward the sleeve. So you find like the halfway point. And I'm going to go ahead and just pin that for now. Just to hold it in place. Now I'm going to go to the inside. You can, if you wish, just tack this by hand. But what I usually do is once I get my placement, I stitch it to the seam allowance and I stitch it out in that direction so it's extending out that ½ inch. Back in the 80s, they would stick thicker pads and they would put, out an inch or more sometimes. They'd have like these really exaggerated, but this I think ½ inch is plenty. So just to keep it in line, I'm not going to sew into the armhole because that's going to distort the pad, but just to keep it in that position. Okay, so now the pad is in place, and I can bring my lining up, and this is going to sew to my self lining. Now make sure, because when you put this on, you want to make sure that the lining that you're putting your arm into is clean. The raw edges are all looking at each other. Okay? Okay. So we can quit that for now. I'm going to